The President of the United States just threatened World War III because Norway didn't give him a prize. I'm not exaggerating, I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm reading you exactly what happened, and if this doesn't terrify you, you haven't been paying attention. PBS revealed over the weekend that Donald Trump sent a letter to the Prime Minister of Norway that essentially said this: "Because you didn't give me the Nobel Peace Prize, I'm done working toward peace." Let me repeat that. The sitting president of the United States is threatening global war because his feelings got hurt. This is the Norway letter. This is what Donald Trump actually wrote to another world leader, and it's the most deranged thing we've seen from this man yet, and that's saying something. If you're watching this right now and you care about what's happening to this country, hit that subscribe button. We need every voice amplified right now because mainstream media is too afraid to call this what it is. Like this video, share it with everyone you know, and let's make sure people understand what we're actually dealing with here. Because this isn't normal. This will never be normal. Here's what Trump wrote word for word. "Dear Jonas, considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, although it will always be predominant, but can now think about what is good and proper for the United States of America. Denmark cannot protect that land from Russia or China, and why do they have a right of ownership anyway? There are no written documents. It's only that a boat landed there hundreds of years ago, but we had boats landing there also. I have done more for NATO than any other person since its founding. And now, NATO should do something for the United States. The world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland. Thank you." Let's break down the absolute insanity of what you just heard. First, Trump is claiming he stopped 8 wars. Which wars? Name them. He can't, because they don't exist. He's lying, as usual, but that's not even the most disturbing part. The disturbing part is that he's openly admitting that his foreign policy, his approach to global peace and security, is now directly tied to whether or not he gets a shiny medal. That's not governance. That's not leadership. That's a toddler having a tantrum on the world stage, except this toddler has nuclear codes. Now let's talk about his argument for taking Greenland. He says Denmark has no right to it because a boat landed there hundreds of years ago, and there are no written documents. Okay, Donald. If we're going to use that logic, then every indigenous person in North America has a legitimate claim to kick your ass off this continent right now. You want to poke holes in land ownership based on historical boat landings? Fine. Let's talk about the boats that landed at Plymouth Rock. Let's talk about the boats that brought colonizers who genocided entire populations. You don't get to claim Greenland is illegitimate while sitting in the White House on stolen land. The hypocrisy is so thick you could cut it with a knife. But here's what's really chilling about this moment, and I need you to understand the historical parallel here because we've seen this before. We've seen this exact pattern before. Donald Trump didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize, so now he's threatening war and demanding territory. Does this remind you of anything? Let me paint you a picture. A young man in Austria gets rejected from art school. His feelings are hurt, his ego is bruised, he spirals into rage and resentment. Fast forward a few years, and that same man is invading neighboring countries, claiming he needs living space, claiming these territories belong to his people, claiming national security demands expansion. We know how that story ended. 6 million Jews murdered, tens of millions dead, entire cities reduced to rubble, and it all started with a bruised ego and unchecked power. I'm not saying Trump is Hitler. I'm saying the pattern is identical. I'm saying we're watching the same psychological dynamics play out in real time, and nobody with the power to stop it is doing a damn thing. Trump is angry because Obama won the Nobel Peace Prize back in 2009. That's what this is really about. This isn't about national security. This isn't about protecting America from Russia or China. This is about a deeply insecure man who has spent his entire life comparing himself to Barack Obama and losing every single time. Obama won the Nobel Prize. Trump didn't. And now, 17 years later, we're on the brink of global conflict because Donald Trump's ego can't handle the fact that a black man was given an honor he believes he deserves. Think about that. Think about the fact that this entire crisis, this threat to world peace, this demand for Greenland, this unraveling of NATO, traces back to one man's pathological jealousy of Barack Obama. And before anyone tries to twist my words, I'm not blaming Obama. Obama didn't do anything wrong, but Trump's obsession with him has poisoned this man's brain to the point where he's willing to start a war just to prove he's better. That's not leadership, that's mental illness, that's dementia mixed with narcissism mixed with unchecked power, and it's the most dangerous combination imaginable. And speaking of mental illness, let's be clear about what we're witnessing. This letter to Norway isn't just unhinged, it's evidence of cognitive decline. This is a man who cannot process rejection. This is a man who cannot distinguish between personal slights and national security threats. This is a man who is rapidly losing his grip on reality, and the people around him know it. J.D. Vance knows it. The cabinet knows it. Republican lawmakers know it, and they're doing nothing. The 25th Amendment exists for exactly this scenario, a president who is mentally unfit to serve. But it won't be invoked because everyone in Trump's orbit is either complicit, cowardly, or calculating their own political survival. They'd rather let the country burn than admit they backed the wrong guy. Now let's talk about what Trump is actually threatening here. He says the world isn't secure unless America has complete and total control of Greenland. That's a direct quote. Complete and total control. That's not diplomatic language. That's not negotiation. That's conquest. That's imperialism. That's the language of dictators who believe might makes right. And it's not based on any legitimate security concern. We already have a military presence in Greenland. We have radar installations. We have surveillance capabilities. Russia and China aren't threatening Greenland. There's zero evidence they're even interested in it. This is a manufactured crisis designed to justify aggression, and anyone who's studied history knows exactly where this leads. But here's the part that should terrify you most. Trump isn't acting alone. He's got enablers. Ted Cruz came out over the weekend and said, "Yeah, we absolutely need Greenland for national security. We can't do without it." Ted Cruz, a sitting U.S. senator, endorsing imperial conquest, endorsing the idea that America should just take whatever it wants because we're stronger. That's not conservatism. That's not patriotism. That's fascism. That's the logic that led to every major conflict in the 20th century. And Cruz isn't the only one. Republican after Republican is lining up behind Trump's madness because they're terrified of his base, terrified of losing their seats, terrified of being the one who stands up and says, "This is wrong." So we're stuck. We've got a mentally declining president threatening war over a personal grudge. We've got a cabinet that refuses to invoke the 25th Amendment. We've got Republican lawmakers actively enabling his worst impulses. And we've got midterm elections coming up in November, assuming Trump doesn't cancel them. And before you say I'm being paranoid, he's already floated the idea 3 times in the last 2 weeks. 3 times. Each time Republicans laughed it off. Oh, he's joking. He's not serious. That's exactly what they said about Greenland 6 months ago. They said it was a joke. Now he's threatening NATO allies with tariffs if they don't support his invasion plans. See how this works? It starts as a joke. Then it becomes a talking point. Then it becomes policy. Then it becomes reality. And by the time people realize he was serious all along, it's too late. Make sure you're still subscribed because this is only going to get worse. Drop a comment below and tell me if you think Europe should hit us with sanctions. I know it sounds crazy. I know it'll hurt us economically, but I genuinely think it might be the only thing that stops this man. Share this video with anyone who still thinks Trump is just being Trump. This isn't normal. This is dangerous. Let's talk about the economic side of this nightmare, because Trump isn't just threatening war, he's already launching economic warfare. He's announced that starting February 1st, he's slapping a 10% tariff on every NATO country that doesn't support his Greenland takeover. By June, that goes up to 25%. And because of how the European Union works, a tariff on one member is a tariff on all of them. So he's not targeting 8 countries like he claims, he's targeting all 27 EU members plus the United Kingdom. That's economic suicide, that's not strategy, that's chaos. And here's what that means for you. Those tariffs, you're paying them, not Europe, you. Every single time Trump announces tariffs, American consumers pay more. Your groceries cost more. Your electronics cost more. Your clothes cost more. Everything imported from Europe, and that's a lot, gets more expensive. And Europe won't just sit there and take it. They'll retaliate. They'll impose their own tariffs on American goods. They'll sanction us. They'll cut trade deals. They'll isolate us economically. And you know what? They should. I don't say that lightly. I know it'll hurt. I know it'll make life harder for millions of Americans. But sometimes you have to fight a bully by hitting back, and right now, Donald Trump is the world's biggest bully. Economic analysts came out over the weekend warning that we're headed toward depression-level conditions. Not a recession, a depression. And that's before Trump's tariff war even kicks in. We're talking about mass unemployment. We're talking about businesses closing. We're talking about families losing everything. And Trump doesn't care. He's too busy playing risk with real countries, too busy nursing his grudge against Obama, too busy proving to the world that he's tough. Meanwhile, ordinary Americans are about to get crushed. But let's not forget what else came out this weekend, because while Trump was threatening World War III, another story dropped that should disqualify him from office all by itself. A new poll shows that 71% of Americans believe Donald Trump knew about Jeffrey Epstein's sex crimes against underage girls. 71%. That's not a fringe conspiracy theory. That's a national consensus. And here's the kicker. 53% of people who voted for Trump in 2024 also believe he knew. Let that sink in. More than half of Trump's own voters think he was aware that his buddy Jeffrey Epstein was sexually abusing children, and they voted for him anyway. I need you to understand what that means. I need you to sit with that for a second. These people went to the polls in November of 2024 knowing, or at least strongly suspecting, that Donald Trump partied with a pedophile, that he visited Epstein's island, that he was present at Epstein's properties where horrific crimes were committed, and they pulled the lever for him anyway. They chose him. They own this. Every single person who voted for Trump owns what he does now. Every threat, every scandal, every crime. You don't get to say, I didn't know. You knew. The evidence was everywhere. The connections were documented. The photos existed. The flight logs existed. You knew, and you voted for him anyway. And if you're one of those voters who now regrets it, who now sees the Epstein stuff and thinks, oh no, maybe I made a mistake. Tough. You still did it. You still put this man in power. It's like getting behind the wheel drunk, killing someone in a crash, and then saying, I regret it. Sure you do. But people are still dead. The damage is still done. Your regret doesn't erase your responsibility. You voted for a man who is almost certainly a child predator. And now the rest of us have to live with the consequences of your choice. By the way, the poll question referred to Epstein as currently deceased, which is the weirdest phrasing I've ever seen. Currently deceased, as if it's temporary. As if we should check back in a few days to see if he's still dead. I don't know who wrote that, but it gave me a laugh in an otherwise horrifying news cycle. Here's what we know. Trump and Epstein were close for decades. We have photos of them together at parties. We have quotes from Trump calling Epstein a terrific guy who likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. That's a direct quote. Trump said that. Out loud. On the record. And when the Epstein files started coming out, Trump's first move as president-elect was to bury them. He's covering up documents. He's blocking investigations. He's protecting everyone tied to Epstein's network. Why? Because he's one of them. You don't work this hard to hide something unless you're guilty. Innocent people cooperate with investigations. Guilty people obstruct them. Trump is obstructing, which means he's guilty. But let's get back to the dictator stuff, because that's where this is all heading. Over the weekend, Trump's campaign sent out one of the creepiest fundraising emails I've ever seen. It said, "It's Trump. I'm in the Oval Office, and I can't stop thinking about you." Read that again. "I can't stop thinking about you." This came after they got roasted for an earlier email where Trump said he was alone in the Situation Room with all the lights off and a dying laptop. People mocked them relentlessly for how weird and creepy that was. So what did they do? They leaned into it. They went even creepier. They knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted that "I can't stop thinking about you" line in people's heads. They wanted it to sound intimate and personal and frankly disturbing because that generates attention. It gets people talking. It keeps Trump in the headlines. But here's the funny part. When that email went out, Trump wasn't even in the Oval Office. He was at Mar-a-Lago. So either his campaign is so incompetent they don't know where the president is, or Trump himself is so far gone mentally that he doesn't know where he is. Either way, it's terrifying. And instead of the media focusing on the creepy stalker vibes of the email, they focused on whether Trump has dementia. Which, to be fair, is also a valid concern, but both things can be true. He can be mentally declining and running a creepy authoritarian campaign at the same time. And that brings me to the media, because what happened with CBS this week is a perfect example of how Trump consolidates power. Caroline Leavitt, Trump's press secretary, threatened CBS with a lawsuit after Trump sat for a 13-minute interview. 13 minutes. That's how long the leader of the free world can sit still before his brain turns to mush. After the interview, Trump told CBS to air the full thing unedited. Caroline Leavitt smiled and said, "Yeah, we're airing the whole thing, and if you don't, we'll sue your ass off." CBS people laughed. They thought she was joking. She wasn't. Trump has already sued CBS once and won because CBS caved to him. They settled. They gave him what he wanted. So when Caroline Leavitt says, "We'll sue you," that's not a joke. That's a threat backed by precedent. That's how authoritarian regimes control the press. You don't need to arrest journalists when you can bankrupt their employers with lawsuits. You don't need censorship laws when media companies are terrified of legal retaliation. Trump has figured out that the easiest way to control the narrative is to make the media too scared to challenge him. And it's working. This is the playbook. This is how Putin operates. This is how every dictator in history has operated. You can't maintain power if the press is free to expose your crimes, so you threaten them. You sue them. You bankrupt them. You make examples out of anyone who steps out of line. And the rest fall in line voluntarily because they've seen what happens when you don't. That's where we are right now in America. We have a president who openly threatens journalists, who sues media companies into submission, who demands favorable coverage or else. And the media is complying because they're terrified. Before we wrap up, I need you to do something. Go subscribe to every progressive media outlet you can find. Not just me, everyone. Midas Touch, Brian Tyler Cohen, David Pakman, all of them. We don't have the luxury of infighting right now. We don't have the luxury of abandoning anyone because they made one bad decision. Midas Touch hired Michael Cohen, and Cohen turned out to be a snake. They fired him immediately. That doesn't tarnish everything they've built. That doesn't mean you abandon them. It means they made a mistake, they corrected it, and we move on. Because we need every voice we can get. And speaking of snakes, Michael Cohen came out recently and said he was coerced by Letitia James to turn against Trump. He ran back to Trump's camp after spending time in solitary confinement, and now he's giving Pam Bondi ammunition to go after James. This is why we don't make heroes out of grifters. This is why we don't elevate people from the right just because they temporarily switched sides. They're not principled. They're opportunists. And the second the money dries up, they'll flip again. So stop putting Liz Cheney on a pedestal. Stop praising Marjorie Taylor Greene when she says one reasonable thing. They're not allies. They're tourists. Real leftists. People who've been fighting this fight for decades. Those are the people we should be supporting. Here's the reality we're facing. Trump is threatening World War III over a personal grudge. He's enabling a second Holocaust by rounding up immigrants and putting them in camps. He's covering up his ties to a pedophile network. He's threatening the press, he's destroying the economy, he's dismantling NATO, and Republican lawmakers are cheering him on. We are living through the early stages of fascism, and most people don't even realize it because it's happening slowly. But it's happening. Every day, another norm gets destroyed. Every day, another institution gets corrupted. Every day, we slide a little further toward dictatorship. The only question is whether we're going to fight back or whether we're going to let it happen, because it's not going to stop on its own. Trump isn't going to wake up one day and decide to be normal. J.D. Vance isn't going to invoke the 25th Amendment. Republicans aren't going to grow a spine. Europe is going to have to sanction us. The economy is going to have to collapse. Americans are going to have to suffer before enough people wake up and demand change, and by then it might be too late. So here's what you do. You stay informed, you subscribe to independent media, you support journalists who are willing to tell the truth, you call your representatives even though they won't listen, you organize locally, you prepare for the midterms assuming they happen, you don't give up, you don't tune out, you don't pretend everything is fine, because it's not fine. We are in a crisis, and the only way out is through. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Like this video. Share it everywhere, comment below, and let me know what you think. Do you believe Europe should sanction us? Do you think the 25th Amendment will ever be invoked? Do you think we're headed for World War III? I want to hear from you, because we're all in this together and we need to be having these conversations. We need to be prepared for what's coming. Because I promise you, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And when it does, we need to be ready. Stay strong, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next one.